Another way you can create a blended color effect is if you have two solid shapes and you take one of them and you make them give them a transparent value. For example, I have this magenta frame here, and then on top I have this kind of a peach colored frame, and they are both solid 100% opacity. Well, I'm going to take the one on top and I'm going to make that say 50% opacity. So now in doing so, and let me just preview this so you can see it. So in doing so, you can see I've created a third color value by using this transparency effect. So sometimes if you're using imagery, then you want to create a value that's very close to the background value. You get a color and you just reduce the opacity of it so that it will create another value, a third color value. I'm going to increase the opacity just a little bit, maybe bring it to like 75. And as you can see, you have these two colors that are very close, as far as values, but yet you have this larger third color that was created by just throwing back the opacity of the topmost object. So that's another way you can create a blend effect by changing the opacity of the different objects. Okay, in this video, we're going to talk about applying transparency effects. Now, as you remember in the previous exercise, we were able to change the opacity of the topmost item, and it would create like a third value. But if we try to do this now with this, and we pull back the opacity to 50%, all right, well, what happens now is the frame and the text will change its opacity value. And as you can see, let me just preview this so you can see, that's not exactly what I wanted. I just wanted the background to become transparent, but I wanted the words on the inside to remain solid and opaque. All right, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to bring it back to where both are 100%, background, the foreground, and the words. So we select this frame right here. We're going to go up to FX, Transparency. Then if you notice where it says Object, we're going to click on this and we're going to say Fill. So in other words, the only thing that we want to change the opacity of is the fill, but we want the contents, being the words, to remain opaque and solid. So we're going to come here where it says Normal. We're going to make that 50%. So now you can see this is exactly what I wanted to do. I have the background of this frame has become transparent, but the words are still 100% opacity or opaque. So that's how you can actually change the transparency of the object fill, but still keep the text at its original solid opaque designation. Okay, in this video, let's say I'm going to take this green frame right here, all right, and I'm going to put it slightly over the magenta frame behind it. And what I want to do is I want to create a gradient feather that's going to go from this green value into this magenta color. So let's say, for example, I have this placed here. I'm going to go over to the gradient feather tool. I position my crosshair slightly below my name, put my finger on the shift key, click and drag upwards. And as you can see, there is a feather effect, okay? But what it's doing is actually not only is it feathering out the green going into the magenta, but it's also feathering out my name as well. And that's not really what I want to do. What I want to do is I just want to fade the color. So if you notice, if I pull this up a little further, you can see that my name is not opaque. It is actually feathering out with the feather of the frame beneath it. So that's not what I want to do. So let's just take this and let's go back to where we have the solid colors. What you want to do is you're going to go up, you have the frame still selected, you go up to FX, over to Transparency, and then you can go down to where it says Gradient Feather, you click on that. Now by default, what it's going to do is, you can see it's going to feather it from left to right, And you can see it feathered the entire object. In other words, the background and the contents. So like we did before, we go up to Object, drop down to Fill, all right? And then, let's just say we do that, and then let's cancel out of this. Let's bring it back to where it was. So now we're going to go up to Effects, Transparency, then we're going to select Fill, then the Gradient Fill, and you can see that the name is still opaque and the background is feathering out, but it's going from left to right, and that's not what we want. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to double click on Gradient Feather, and we're going to change the angle. So right now I'm going to change it to 90. All right, now you can just type in 90, okay? And then what we're going to do is we're going to change right here the slider to determine how much of that green we want to fade out and how, and I'll pull this over so you can see that it's relatively opaque, and then just a little bit of it fades out here at the top. But the main thing is we're able to keep the name intact. So let's say, for example, if I put it all the way back here and I pull this somewhere toward the middle, all right, I say OK. And let's say I take this frame and I put it right over, directly over the frame behind it. And as you can see, it's just the fill that's going from green to magenta, but the name is remaining opaque. So that's how you can change your gradient feather, you can feather an object and just feather the film and not the fill, and not feather the content of the fill, which of course in this case is the words. Okay, in this video we're going to create what is called a reflective effect. Alright, so the first thing I want to do is I'm going to get an image. It's my Cadillac, my 1951 Cadillac. I'm going to put it right here on the page. And as you can see, even though it looks like it's got a white, a clean background, really that's just a solid white background. For example, if I were to take a frame and give it a color, all right, I give this red color, and then I were to send it to the back, Object, Arrange, Send to Back, you'll notice that the it's a solid white background. So the first thing is I want to get rid of that background. So in this particular case, this image does have a clipping path. So I'm going to click on the image, go to Object, drop down to Clipping Path Options, and then I will say, all right, let's find a Photoshop path. There's it. There is the path. It says Silo, which is short for silhouette. I'll say OK. So now you can see that the image is clipped, and whatever's behind it is going to show up. Okay, great. So now we have that. So now what I'm going to do for this exercise, I am going to take this image. All right, I am going to duplicate it manually. So it is Option, Shift, click, and drag. And as you can see, I just duplicated this image. Now, I'm going to flip it on its vertical axis. All right, so what I want to do, I want to flip it dead center. So I go over here to my reference point, put it in the middle. All right, and then I'm going to flip it right here on the vertical axis so that it flips like this. Very good. Now next up, I'm going to nudge this so that the wheels touch or come as close to touching as possible. That's fine. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this image right here, the bottom image, and I'm going to pull back the opacity. Maybe I'll make that 30% opaque. All right, and then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do what they call a gradient feather. So I'm going to, while I still have this object selected, using the gradient feather tool, I'll click somewhere toward the, what is the top, it's the actual bottom of the image of this vehicle. And then I'm going to put my finger on the shift key, click and drag, so that the feather is actually constrained to a 90-degree angle. So you can see how it fades out going straight down. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this background frame, open it up, left, right, and also I'm going to open it up down below so that you can see Let me preview this. So you can actually see that you have almost like a glass reflective effect. And this is something else you can do in InDesign, and it's what they call non-destructive. In other words, what you do here will not affect the original Photoshop image at all, because all the effects are taking place in InDesign.